Ladies and gentlemen, Namaskar. Welcome to the Department of Justice Pan India Legal Literacy and Legal Awareness Program, an initiative by Government of India through the Department of Justice, a project that is now currently being implemented by the Center for Environmental Law, Education, Research and Advocacy, CEERA, the National Law School of India, University, Bengaluru. I am Sairam Bhatt. I am a professor of law at the National Law School of India, University, Bengaluru. And today, June 20th, 2022, is celebrated as World Refugee Day. Every year, June 20th is marked to celebrate this day, and this video is a legal awareness video for us to appreciate, understand, analyze, and probably work towards protecting the rights of refugees in India and also internationally. Friends, the World Refugee Day and any international day only highlights the plight of certain people in the society, and refugees are actually people who have suffered quite a bit in the last 1 year, especially with the war in Ukraine. We have Ukrainian refugees who are actually traveling and seeking asylum in Europe. And also, not to forget, with the Ukraine war, we have refugees from Myanmar, the Rohingya refugees who have taken asylum in Bangladesh. I think internationally we have understood Refugee Day as a day to remind ourselves that we owe a duty to humankind all across the world. And as countries, we must take all kinds of social and economic measures to actually help refugees to protect their rights, both nationally as well as internationally. And this day is kind of a day that should actually be celebrated in terms of trying to take initiatives and steps to remind our responsibility towards the refugees. The United Nations, friends, celebrates and observes, if I can use the word observes, not celebrate, this day to actually, recognize the courage and strength of people who unfortunately were forced to flee their home country. This they had to do inevitably to escape conflict and persecution, and hence to build empathy and understanding towards the plight and to recognize and rebuild the lives of these refugees. I think this day is something that is observed annually by the United Nations. Friends, what is the aim of the World Refugee Day? The aim is to raise awareness of the problems related to the refugees and to demonstrate that by working together we can resolve the large-scale refugee crisis and assist displaced people in finding secure and happy homes. Friends, when we talk about refugees, it is a kind of an issue of displacement. There are two forms of displacement. One, internal displacement, the other, displacement that transgresses national boundaries, borders, and national frontiers. When citizens of one country move on to another country and seek some kind of protection because of the kind of displacement that has happened in their home country, we say they are refugees. However, internal displacement also occurs due to developmental projects and several other aspects that can happen within the domestic state as well. Uh, when we recognize the World Refugee Day, we kind of solidify welcoming the notion of immigrants. Uh, Quite important places like the Eiffel Tower in Paris, the Empire State Building in New York are illuminated with blue light and color. This is to actually mark this day and mark the day on which the Convention relating to the status of refugee 1951 was actually first established. Friends, the Convention on Refugees 1951 is an important convention internationally because this is a convention that obligates members nations of the United Nations through a multilateral treaty to actually take responsibilities of refugees, to actually give them asylum, to give them shelter, to give them food, and to take care of their basic responsibilities and needs when they seek asylum. Interestingly, India has not been a party to the Refugee Convention. We have not ratified this convention, yet India has always followed the principles and the spirit of this international convention. Uh, of course, when we talk about the rights of refugees, basically the rights of the refugees can be highlighted uh, into three categories. First, we talk about their freedom to work, because unless they work, they cannot have a living. Two, we also talk about the freedom to move, because refugees may immediately move into a neighboring country, but they may want to move to a better country where they can actually assimilate with the culture and the society. So they must have the freedom to move. And most importantly, I think we talk about their freedom to access education. So, freedom to work, move, and access education are three primary rights of a refugee that is recognized by the UN Refugee Convention. Who is a refugee? I think this is something that we'll have to probably understand from a legal perspective, and from also understanding the kind of notions that we are talking about the International Refugee Day. Usually, a refugee is one who has been forced to flee his country. So it's not by his choice that he leaves his homeland. It is something of a force. That force is either military or a political force, and unfortunately, that is the main reason why they flee from their country. Second, they are forced to flee because there is a fear of persecution, and this fear of persecution is based on race. It could be based on religion, it could be based on nationality. It is basically the minority community or members of a particular social group who fear the state and the might of the state, and they fear for their life, they fear for their livelihood, and hence they are forced to flee from their motherland to actually seek asylum in some other country. Basically, friends, these are called as asylum seekers till they're granted the status of refugee by their respective state. That is the state that actually allows them to enter. So they are basically asylum seekers, but once they have been granted asylum, it is the home state where they are called in that will actually grant them the status of refugee. Now, refugees are kind of internationally recognized because they need certain kinds of protection in the state. They need international help as well. And hence, you will notice that this is an international challenge and a problem. But I think the United Nations, through their Commissioner of Refugees, that is UNHCR, does take a lot of initiatives to recognize the rights of refugees, give them aid through the country that is their welcome country. And that is how the refugees have been given a lot of international protection, and international law comes to their rescue as well. Interestingly, it is important to understand who is not a refugee, and I think this is where we should definitely appreciate the fact that anyone who commits a crime in their home state, which is a crime against peace, it could be a war crime, it could be a crime against humanity, something that is defined under international law, will never be considered as a refugee. So, if you are to seek a refuge and you need the status of a refugee and you need the protection of international law as a refugee, you should or you ought to not to have committed any crime whatsoever. So I think when you say who is not a refugee, you will also appreciate and understand if you have acquired a new nationality, you will not be considered as a refugee. So from your home country, if you have actually accepted nationality in some other country and you have been granted that kind of nationality, you will not be considered as a refugee. Someone who has voluntarily given up or re-established himself in another country will also not be considered as a refugee. So, broadly, these are the parameters. Someone who voluntarily gives up, or one who voluntarily adopts another country, or one who has actually committed any act of guilt contrary to the principles of international law, all of these people will never be considered as refugee at all. What is important for us to understand at this point of time is that the Constitution of India, which talks about a right to life, and India being a democratic nation, a country that has faced a lot of humanitarian crisis for its own citizens, not only during the colonial times, even post the colonial times, from neighboring states and others. The Indian Constitution actually is a robust document. It's the fundamental law of the land that protects basic human rights not only of citizens but of all persons. So the Constitution of India does definitely recognize the rights of refugees, especially in the past when we have seen a lot of influx of refugees, like the Tibetan refugees, to which India continues to be a land that has given them protection, that has given them employment, that has protected their social, economic, and cultural lives, as the case may be. So, despite the fact that India does not have a specific legislation to protect the rights of refugees, we have always been a land that has welcomed refugees from neighboring countries, and we have provided asylum to them right throughout our history. What is important at this point of time, probably for us to understand, is that there are legislations in India that can actually be referred to as legislation that matter to refugees. The first and the foremost legislation that one would want to look at is the act called the Foreigners Act of 1946. Now, essentially, the Foreigners Act addresses and tackles the issue of refugees in India in a sense that it actually deals with foreigners and foreign citizens, and it could be a legislation that can be used to deport a foreigner from India. This law does not, guide or aid or address the concerns of refugees as a class of individuals who need the protection of the state. Nevertheless, it is a legislation that can be unfortunately used in case a refugee actually commits a crime in this country, and he is considered to be deported from this country as well. So, under the Foreigners Act of 1946, that kind of deportation can definitely be exercised. There are legislations like the Passport Act of 1967, which also is a law that can actually grant you, citizenship in this country, and you may be entitled to the Indian passport so as to travel from India to different other nations. In terms of the Tibetans, you will notice that the Passport Act of 1967 has been enabled to the Tibetans to travel. So you will notice that these are some of the legislations that are critical and important about how the state may allow movement from India to other jurisdictions as well. There is the Extradition Act of 1962. That is also something that India may be applying to refugees, because in case the refugee is sought by his home country under an extradition treaty between India and that state, then the Extradition Act of 1962 and the process that is laid down in the Extradition Act of 1962 may have to be followed. Also, we have the Citizenship Act of 1955. It was recently amended. It led to a lot of protest on street. It is a 2019 amendment to the Citizenship Act, which did anticipate refugees from neighboring countries, but who are considered to be seeking asylum in this country. And you will see that with recent incidents in Afghanistan, a lot of Indians in Afghanistan had to return back, especially after the Taliban rule came into place. And the Citizenship Amendment Act of 2019 now may be used to give citizenship to Indians or persons of Indian origin who were working in Afghanistan and who had actually become citizens of Afghanistan. So we have a lot of Sikh communities in Afghanistan who have sought refugee back in India, and the Citizenship Act in that sense has been used to a lot of purpose over there. Finally, there is a legislation called the Illegal Migrants Determination by Tribunals Act of 1983. Illegal Migrants Act is what that act is usually called of. So such kinds of legislations do exist in this country. However, you will notice that the Indian Parliament has not passed any specific legislation giving refugees a specific guarantee of rights and specific obligations of the state to protect their interest as well. The UN High Commissioner in India has estimated, please note, that as on June 2021, India may have nearly 2,08,065 refugees in this country. Please note, I repeat the figures. This is as per UN High Commissioner for Refugees. As on June 2021, India may have 2,08,065 refugees. That is a very significant number, and that number clearly states that India is one of those countries which has one of the highest number of refugees in its own land. Now, this is despite the fact that India is not a party to the Refugee Convention of 1951, which clearly establishes India's position as a global leader on human rights. That India has always gone by the empathy, the compassion to protect human lives, despite any legal obligation whatsoever internationally. Um, so protection under international law is not necessarily by conventions and treaty, and I think India has definitely shown the path forward in granting asylum to a number of refugees from neighboring countries, including, if one has to remember, the Tamil refugees from Sri Lanka. This was a time when Tamil refugees from Sri Lanka sought asylum in India during the LTTE era, and India has welcomed these Sri Lankans, and there are nearly 94,000 Sri Lankan refugees living in this country, whereas the number of Tibetan refugees is also very similar. It is around 85,000 to around 1.5 lakhs as we stand today. So I think India has been a leading example, and I think it is very appropriate for us at this point of time to observe the International Refugee Day on June 20th. And I think you will notice that in Indian Constitution, we do not discriminate between citizens and non-citizens, especially when it comes to arbitrary action of the state under Article 14 and the right to life and liberty under Article 21. The Supreme Court, in several cases, has laid down the rights of refugees. It has protected the right of refugees as well as being the custodian of the Constitution. I think the Supreme Court has always stood by refugees and their problems as well. What are the rights of refugees in general? I think the rights of refugees in general can be considered to be the following. First and the foremost, I think they have the right to the basic necessities of life. I think food, clothing, and shelter is something that the refugees have the basic right to. Second, I think the refugees have the right to education. I've reiterated this. I think education plays a very, very important role in the rights of refugees. They definitely have the right of work, labor legislations, and so social security wherever they can be granted or extended to. They have the right of public relief and assistance. I think the states have a duty and obligation to grant that public relief and assistance to the refugees as well. What is important is that refugees have the right to artistic and industrial property, whatever they create in any land where they migrate. I think that land must protect their artistic, cultural rights and industrial property that they have created. This is a very important philosophy, and the states have to recognize the same under international law. What is also critical and important is the freedom to practice their own religion. India is a secular nation, and I think we respect all religions, welcome all religions to practice and profess their own religion in this nation. And I think the same kind of freedom of religion is something that refugees are basically entitled to. What is the theme for the World Refugee Day 2022? Friends, the theme for the World Refugee Day 2022 is the right to seek safety. Whoever, whatever, and whenever. Everyone has the right to seek safety. I think it's a very, very important message that the theme for this year communicates. I think whoever you are, from wherever you are, whatever religion you may be, whatever identity you may be, whatever race you may be, whatever may be your place of birth, I think as a basic human being, you definitely have the right to safety. I think this is the message, this is the theme for the World Refugee Day 2022. I think it's an important message, especially when we talk about the kind of persecution Rohingyas have faced in Myanmar, the kind of war that Ukrainians are currently facing from Russia. I think this message is a very clear message to the world that every nation must welcome human beings who are seeking asylums. It may be individuals or a group of individuals who are seeking this asylum, and the basic duty to provide safety is definitely essentially there under the World Refugee Day theme. Coming to and finally concluding the aspect of India and refugees. Friends, the Indian ethos is based on the principle of Vasudev Kutumbakam, the philosophy that everyone from the world is welcome to India. The world is one. India welcomes the world. I think, despite our political ideological differences, India has always respected human rights of not only its citizens but also human rights of non-citizens. The Indian Constitution has always been an inclusive constitution. Um, the Indian Supreme Court has always been the torchbearer of the rights of all human beings. Um, the Indian government has, taken very active steps in international negotiations and in international law. Despite the fact that India has not been a party to the Refugee Convention, it has always accepted the mandate of UNHCR. It has welcomed refugees from different countries as being a leader in the subcontinent. Being a member of SARC, you notice that India has decided that all religions, be it Hindu, be it Christians, be it Jain, the Parsis, the Sikh, the Buddhist, all of these who want to make India as their protection home are definitely welcome to stay in India if they fear persecution. So I think India has always abided by the principles of international law, and we have always looked at protecting the tradition and respecting international conventions. And I think we have always allowed foreign citizens to assimilate within the culture of this country. Interestingly, you will notice that the Supreme Court has held that all rights should be made available to citizens and foreigners as well, especially the right to equality and the right to life. And hence, with that kind of mandate, India seems to be quite a safe country for refugees, say from Bangladesh, from Sri Lanka, from Pakistan, including sometimes when we say we have allowed uh, Tibetan refugees from China and the Tibetan land to come to this country. I think we have laid down a very good leadership for the protection of refugees and for the protection of asylum seekers. I think it's important for India to recognize refugee rights, but at the same time, India has its own national policies on protecting its national interest. And hence, let's not forget the fact that while refugees have rights, migrants who come illegally to the country, immigrants who actually come illegally to the country are actually violating not only international law but they're violating state law as well. So it is very important to distinguish between illegal immigrants and refugees. And unless and until we make that segregation, every nation might put its national interest at the forefront. Because I think finally it's about the legality of seeking asylum as against the illegality of moving away from one country to another. As I told you, refugees are with certain purpose, with certain persecution, and that is different from any kind of illegal immigration that takes place across the border for, say, jobs or for better employment, for better opportunities or better livelihood resources. I think this is a very clear and important message as we speak today, that refugees are not illegal immigrants. Refugees have a different status, they have a different protection level. Illegal immigrants do not seek to be refugees, and they should not actually mix or confuse between the rights of refugees and, of course, the rights of migrants. So, the duty of the state is towards both. However, refugees have a higher status, they have a higher degree of protection, and refugees are using legitimate means and mechanisms under international law to seek protection. And they are not here to make a good life, they are here because of the fear of persecution in their own land. And I think that would be a clear message as we go forward on this day. Finally, I think this video is thanks to the Department of Justice, Government of India, rather the entire initiative of CEERA-NLSIU and the YouTube videos that we have put across. The kind of legal awareness initiative that we have undertaken is thanks to the project and funding by the Department of Justice. So thanks to their assistance that we are here talking about International Refugee Day, and thanks to the National Law School of India University as well. We are using the platform for better communication, for better awareness, so that people are aware how to observe this day, what is the purpose of observing this day. And I think showing that kind of empathy, showing the legal status of rights, protection of these rights is, I think, the basic reason why this video has been made. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you like the video. Give us your feedback. If you wish to know about any other international day or any other legal topic, you can always write to us, and it will be our endeavor to actually raise this legal awareness and also speak about what India has done in that particular matter. Thank you so much. Namaskar.